I'm starting this story at the end, which is the best place to start sometimes. Right, I was in my Mini, coming back from watching the F1 stock cars at Leicester, and I got on the dual carriageway, and at 70 mile an hour limit, I was doing about 70, and it started knocking a little bit, so I slowed up, and the knocking got worse. I slowed up some more, and suddenly it went bang and stopped. Now, usually, I could manage to limp home, but not this time. Anyway, I thumbed the lift, and a Volkswagen camper stopped. I mean, how I remember that, I don't know, that's a miracle, isn't it? And they towed me to the next pub. And I must have used the pub phone because we didn't have mobiles. So I phoned my mate up in Lincoln, who came out and towed me back to his house. I took his car home, and the next morning I took his car back to his house and started taking the engine out the Mini, and him and his brother went to the breaker's yard and got me a second-hand 1100 engine, which I could put straight in, and I worked all day with only a very short break, but it was ready to go home at 9 at night. So from breaking down 60 odd miles away, I'd recovered the car and changed the engine and was on the road again in less than 24 hours. And I was telling someone about it recently, and they said, well, that'll be a good story to say on a video, which you may or may not agree with. Anyway, I'm sure you can tell me. But it just brought me to thinking about young people today are a bit spoilt. Because, I mean, when you, 1920, say, and your insurance isn't too much, you can buy a second-hand 205 GTE or a Golf GTI, you know, and they're really quick cars. I mean, you know, you'd be struggling to beat them, to be honest. You know, even though they're, you know, quite a few years old now. But the thing is, you see, and I'm talking about now the early 70s, it was very different. You didn't have this spare money. You know, an Englishman's 40-hour week covered his living expenses then, unlike today where you get some extra. And America had some extra then as well, but we didn't. So, and this is the point of the story, it taught us to be inventive, you know, and to find cheaper solutions. Now also I have to tell you that the only fast car around then, the first one of the Chrome Super Minis, was of course the 1275 Mini Cooper S, which was actually a racing engine, and they were very expensive. The normal working man couldn't afford one. There was one in the next village to us, but he was an airline pilot, so he's on that sort of money. You know, he's a cut above the rest of us. So we had to become inventive. Anyway, Carl, my clever friend, he got he got a mini engine first. He did a mini engine, and he made it bigger, and he fitted Devon Dorset pistons in, which made it about 1020cc, about, and he put 1100 cam in, and I did an engine. That's how I actually got to know him, you know, and that's how I come to work for him, you know, and do engines. So we did that. But anyway, he did another one with the 1100. That's the A series BMC 1100. And he bored that out because, you see, the thing is, the easiest way to get more power is increase the engine size. I know this is, obvious, but it's not that obvious. And in this country, with petrol being so expensive because of tax, that's why we have smaller engines compared to, say, the US. Because our petrol was like 10 times the price of theirs because of tax. In the 70s I'm talking about, 1970s. So that's what we're really talking about and why we did it. So this is getting to the point of the story. I had an Austin Healey Mark I Sprite, commonly known as a frog eye, because the headlights stuck about the bonnet and it looked a bit like a frog's eyes. And because I was then working doing engines, I decided to do an inline 1100cc A-series engine. Now, what Carl did then, his first one, as I said, was a 1000cc, a 998 one. But this one, he bought it out and he put, I think it was Velocet pistons in. And he put a 997 Cooper cam in. Now, the reason you used that camshaft was because it was, I think then, a long while ago obviously, we're talking about £12 from BMC, and it was almost identical to a Piper camshaft, which cost £60. And so this is why, as I say, we're explaining this, that you couldn't just buy off the shelf something that would run rings around everything else. You had to be inventive. And so clever Carl, that's what he did, and I did one. Well, after a little while, Hillman Imp Pistons did the same job, exactly the same job, but the deck height, which is the height from the middle of the gudgeon pin to the top of the piston, was 100 thou less than was required for the block. So that because the pistons, they were flat top pistons, they came to the top of the block, you see. Well, so the answer for that was to have 100 thou milled off the top of the block, and that's what we did. And it made a very good engine, like I said, for a fraction of the price, you got quite a fast engine. And so, as I say, I had this this Mark I Sprite, so I bought an inline 1100 engine, and I did that one. But then I got 1100, and wanting to use this engine, I fitted it. The only difference is the back main has got a lip seal on for it's not a cork seal, it's like a round wick seal, it's called. And what you had to do was actually cut that off, and then you could use the engine as transfer. They were identical then, absolutely identical. And that's what I did. So I had this inline engine and I swapped it, made it transverse, and I fitted it in my 1100, and I had the day to do it, and the next day we were going on holiday to Cornwall, which is a long trip. I don't know how far, but it was over 500 miles anyway, because I set off and the engine was tight, and by the time we got there it was more or less run in, and the only thing I had to do when I got there was adjust the fan belt. So that meant, you've got to admit I'd done a good job. Anyway, I ran that car until it fell to bits. They rotted. That's why everyone had one. Everyone that could weld had one, because they were they'd gone rotten, and they were quite an easy fix if you had a welder, which I did, of course. So I ran that for, I think it's 18 months, and it did 42,000 miles without a hiccup. Anyway, I kept the engine, of course, then had the Mini a year later and put it in. And as I said, everything was fine, and it was in for 6 weeks, but it was never the same. And I don't know why to this day. Never the same. Anyway, like I said, we were coming home and the crankshaft broke, and that was it, you know. So, but I can't complain, you know, having money's worth out that engine, I tell you. Really did. So, hope you've enjoyed the story anyway. Just something from the past that's a little different, and the reason that we had to do it. And it might just be of interest for someone today.